Hi, I'm Lucy from Sew Essential, and today we're taking a closer look at the Babylock Aspire, which is a combined cover stitch and overlocker machine, and just one of a wide range of hundreds of machines available to buy on our site sewessential.co.uk. At Sew Essential, we pride ourselves on using our expert knowledge to help you find the perfect machine for you. And that's why we've made this video, but we're also always here to support you by phone or email too. Like all Babylock machines, the Babylock Aspire is incredibly easy to thread thanks to the air threading loopers, but on the Aspire it's the push button version, so you can thread those loopers at the touch of a button. Plus you can thread in any order, so if you want to change a thread for any reason, just change that individual thread. There is no need to rethread the whole machine. It has automatic thread tension, so you can go from sewing a piece of denim to sewing a piece of jersey and achieve beautifully neat stitches without changing any of the settings on the machine. It sits in the middle of the Babylock range, and we've got the full range on our site, and it sits below the Ovation and Gloria, which are also combined machines. But like those machines, you can sew with up to 8 threads on the Aspire, despite the fact it is a much more compact machine. And this allows you to create a wide range of overlocker, cover stitch and combined stitches, including things like a flat lock, a rolled hem, a variety of different cover stitch options, a 5-thread safety stitch which is commonly used in industry, and lots of expressive and decorative options too, and I'll show you lots of those in the video later. It also has exceptionally bright LED lighting and additional throat space and space around the needle, so you can use the full range of Coverlock accessories with this machine, including things like the neck binding attachment with the rate guide. The presser foot lift is conveniently located on the front of the machine, so it's lovely and accessible, but when you purchase it from us you also get a knee lift included too, which means you can raise and lower the presser foot whilst keeping both hands on the fabric. It also includes a perfectly fitting trim bin to catch those excess scraps of fabric, a magnetic pin dish on top of the machine, and handy storage compartments. I'll pop a link in the corner of the screen so you can visit our website, take a closer look and purchase it there. Later in the video we'll take a look at what comes in the box, but now let's get started by taking a closer look at what this amazing machine can do for you. We'll start by threading the machine for a 4-thread overlocking stitch. So I've placed reels of thread on the left needle, right needle, upper looper and lower looper thread stands. But you'll notice on the Aspire there's a 5th thread stand, which is the one you will use for the cover stitch, and I'll show you that later in the video. However, you also have the option with the Aspire to purchase an additional thread stand separately, which just slots into the back of the machine and then allows you to sew with up to 8 threads, which previously you could only do on the Ovation and the Gloria, which are also available on our site. But now you've got the option for all those additional decorative stitches on a more compact, smaller machine in the Aspire. It doesn't matter which order we thread the machine in, which is another great advantage. Not only is it easy to thread, but if one of the threads breaks or you want to change one of the colours, you don't have to rethread the whole machine, you just replace that particular thread. And to thread it, we go up through the telescopic thread guide from back to front, and then this extends out of shot and you have it at the full height when you're using the machine, but I just wanted to show you in shot. And then you take your thread and click it into the auto thread tension at the top, which is another incredibly time-saving feature. It means that not only are you saving time on the general setup of your machine, you're also saving time on messing around with thread tensions as well. There's no need to do that. The machine will automatically set the tensions based on the stitch that you've chosen, and you can go from sewing different types of fabric and still get beautiful results without having to mess around with any of the tensions. So I'm just repeating the first step for the upper looper and the 2 needles as well, and we're now ready to take a look at the really exciting part, which is the air threading. So I'll show you that in just a moment, but before we do so, I also want to show you this handy little magnetic dish here that's so convenient for just popping your pins as you sew as well, and that's a new feature as well on this machine. Now we'll go ahead and thread the needles. And I should just say at this point that you can thread these machines in any order. That's another great advantage of the Baby Lock range, is that you don't have to thread in a specific order. So if one of your threads breaks or you want to change one colour, you don't need to re-thread the whole machine. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the thread behind the relevant guides on the front of the machine, up and over. And then when we come down to the needle bar, you'll notice there's 2 needle bars. There's one at the front with space for the 3 cover stitch needles, and then the one behind it has got space for the 2 overlocker needles. So I'm just going to take the thread around the thread guide, and this is a manual threading machine, so you just pass the thread through the eye of the needle from the front to the back. There are options in the Baby Lock range that come with needle threaders. So you've got air threading needle threaders on the Gloria, which is also a combined machine, and on the Acclaim as well, which is an overlocker. And then you've also got some models that have got a needle threader in the more traditional sense attached to the machine. So if you are interested in any of those models, do check them out on our website, because we've got the full range on our site, and they've all got in-depth review videos on those pages as well, so that you can see the machine in action. But you can see there we just thread those needles in the usual way, and we are now ready to go ahead and start sewing a 4-thread overlocking stitch. To thread the loopers, we open the front cover and slide across and open the other cover. And here you'll see we have threading ports for the upper, lower and cover stitch looper. We also have a lever so that we can select whether we want to be in serging or sewing or overlocking mode, or whether we want to be in threading mode. So if we move that down to threading mode and turn the hand wheel towards us, you will see that those pipes have now clicked into place so that I can get the thread from the loopers, threading ports, through to the loopers. And some of the previous models, you had to select which looper you wanted to thread, and then you used a lever to create the jet of air. This is the latest technology, which is the electronic push button threading. So I can actually thread all 3 loopers at the same time if I want to, and it's done with the simple press of a button, and I don't have to select which one. I can thread any of the loopers. I just have to insert the thread into the threading port and press the button. So I'm just going behind the thread guide here, and I'm going to start with my lower looper. Just insert some thread into that port like so, and then you want to make sure you've got a decent amount in there, but just press the button and the looper will be threaded for you. You can see there it's come out through that lower looper, and if you've ever used a manual overlocker, you will understand the beauty of this, that, you know, there is no fiddling around with tweezers, there's no trying to almost get inside the machine. Literally a mere press of a button and the job is done for you. So I'm just going to repeat that with the upper looper as well, and you can see that is also now threaded. Before we start sewing, I just want to show you how easy it is to set the machine up for the relevant stitches as well. And Baby Lock make this really easy because they give you an in-depth step-by-step guide in your instruction manual, but you also get a quick reference threading guide as well, and there are handy little tables for each of the stitches that tell you which of the options on the stitch selector to select, how to set your stitch width and length, so that it's really quick and easy to spot those settings at a glance, which isn't always the case with all brands of overlocker. Babylock do make that particularly easy. So let's talk through that now for the 4-thread overlocking stitch. The first thing we need to do is just close this cover, and then we close the front cover, but I just want to point out that if you're still in threading mode, the machine won't let you do that, which is great because you'll know straight away that you need to move it to serging mode. So there's no chance of shutting the front cover and trying to start sewing when you're actually still in threading mode. So we now can close that front cover. And then we look at our reference guide or our table and we choose which one of these we need for the relevant stitch. So I'm going to choose A for a 4-thread overlocking stitch. We then set our stitch length and stitch width accordingly, and I've set those according to the recommendations in the manual, but you know, you can play around with those and there is a bit of leeway. These are just the suggested settings in the manual. The other thing you'll want to think about is that you want your blade engaged when you're sewing an overlocking stitch, but if you want to disengage it for any reason, perhaps you're sewing a cover stitch or you just don't want to trim the edge of your fabric, you just turn that dial and it will say lock, and you know then that that blade isn't going to cut your fabric. And I think that's another fantastic feature that just makes life so easy. It's quite a manual process on some overlockers that you have to follow to disengage or engage the blade, but on the Babylock models it is so easy. You just turn that dial up and down and you know that you've engaged or disengaged the blade. And then the other thing I want to point out on the Aspire is the fact that we've got the foot lift on the front to the side of the machine. So this is lovely and accessible, really easy when you're sewing and you want to stop and raise that foot. It's right there for you. But not only that, you've also got the knee lift included when you purchase it from us, which previously was only available on the Gloria and the Ovation, which are also both available on our site. But you've got that option there, and this is something that's used in industry. I'll show you when we look at what comes in the box later in the video, but you just insert it in the front there and there's a paddle that sits below the table. If you push that paddle to the right, it will raise the foot for you, and that gives you the option to keep both hands on the fabric. So some people really like to have that option of a knee lift as well. And then the only other thing to mention is the differential feed. Lovely and easy to use. Most of the time you're going to have that set on neutral or normal or standard, but if you notice, for example, that your fabric's stretching a little bit as it feeds through the machine, you're getting a bit of a fluted or wavy seam, you can knock that up and it will compress the fabric as you sew and prevent that from happening. On lighter weight fabrics you can knock it right up to the top and you can create a gathered effect. And then conversely, if you actually want to stretch the fabric as you sew, perhaps you've done a rolled edge on a stretch fabric and you want to exaggerate it and make it more of a lettuce edge, you can knock the differential feed down and then it will stretch the fabric as you sew. But we've got lots of videos on our YouTube channel going through these different techniques, step-by-step tutorials, so do check those out as well. So let's go ahead now and sew the 4-thread overlocking stitch, but before we do that I just want to point out some of the really useful markings on the machine. So you'll notice on the front of the foot you've got 5 markings which correspond with the cover stitch needles from the left. So you've got cover stitch needle 1, 2 and 3, and then the next 2 markings correspond to your overlocker needle markings. So you always know where those stitches are going to be placed on your fabric. You also have markings here which correspond with different seam allowances, that you can line the edge of your fabric up with one of these markings to achieve an even seam allowance, a regular seam allowance. For example, the one marked R will give you a 5/8 seam allowance when you're doing a 4-thread overlocking stitch. But if you can't remember what the markings correspond to, just take a tape measure and measure from the marking on the foot, whichever is the furthest left needle that you're using, and measure across to there, and you will know which seam allowance you're going to be sewing with. Although it's also worth mentioning at this point, because this is a Coverlock machine, and you can sew an overlocking stitch and a cover or chain stitch with it, actually you can sew what's referred to in industry as a safety stitch, which is when you use a 2-thread chain stitch and a 3-thread overlocking stitch, and it's a really secure seam, but it will also give you a perfect 5/8 seam allowance depending on how you set the machine up. But you can do that, and then you will know you will get a perfect 5/8 seam every time you sew. But let's go ahead and sew a straightforward 4-thread overlocking stitch now. I've got a double layer of calico here, so the same sort of weight as a mid-weight denim, nice and thick, and a woven fabric. I'm just going to raise my foot and slip the fabric under and then go ahead and sew. And you can see there I've got a lovely neat balanced stitch. That's the top side of the fabric, and then we've got the wrong side of the fabric here. And you'll also notice that I've attached the trim bin to the machine, which comes with the machine. So this is the first one in the Baby Lock range to come with a trim bin that fits to the machine, included with the machine when you purchase it from us. So that's another nice little touch. And then I'm going to take this stretchy cotton jersey fabric, and I'm going to sew that without changing any of the settings on the machine at all. Got a nice handy thread cutter on the side of the machine there as well. And you can see I've got a lovely neat 4-thread overlocking stitch on my cotton jersey and my calico without having to change any of the settings on the machine. I've just been able to go from one fabric to the other thanks to that magnificent auto thread tension. It's just so brilliant, and it just makes life so easy. If you do want to fine tune the tension for any reason, you do have the option to do that. You'll find a dial here on the front of the machine, and you can increase or decrease the thread tension there if you're working with a particularly tricky fabric, for example. But in all honesty, I've got a Baby Lock machine and I don't think I've ever used that. I can't remember using it. One of the other things I want to point out about the Aspire as well is that you have got extra space around the needle and extra throat space as well. So that's another advantage for when you're working on those bigger projects. And when we come to look at the cover stitch option on the machine as well, that extra space means that you are able to use all of the different accessories, including the neck binding attachments which come with the rake guide. They don't fit on all of the Baby Lock machines. They fit on the Gloria and the Ovation, but they will also fit on the Aspire as well. Now I'll show you how to sew a 3-thread overlocking stitch, and I think one of the things to point out is just how easy it is to convert between the different stitches. So to convert between the 4-thread and the 3-thread, I've just removed one of the needles. I've chosen to remove the left needle because I want to do a narrow 3-thread overlocking stitch using only the right needle. And then you just select B on the stitch selector rather than an A, and then I've adjusted my stitch width and stitch length according to the recommendations in the manual. And I'm ready to go ahead now and sew this lovely delicate stitch. So I wouldn't recommend using this to construct garments, but I like to use this when I'm finishing the seams on lighter weight fabrics like linens, cotton lawns, viscose fabrics, that sort of thing. It just gives me a lighter, sort of more delicate stitch. So let's go ahead and sew that now. So you can see there we've got that really pretty, more delicate stitch, just less sort of wide than the 4-thread overlocking stitch, although you can make that narrower as well. But it's just a nice alternative, lovely and neat again, and a great way to finish those lighter weight fabrics. And then once we've got the machine set up for a 3-thread overlocking stitch in the narrow sense, we also can easily convert that so that we can sew a lovely rolled hem. So to convert that 3-thread overlocking stitch to a 3-thread rolled hem, we're going to change our stitch selector again. This time we're going to go for D, and then we're going to change our stitch width and length. The width I'm going to set at 3.5 according to the instructions in the manual. But then when we change the length, we want to go round into the other side of this dial. So you notice that the side we're currently using says standard, but if we go all the way around to the other side, we can get to our rolled hem option. So I'm just going to turn the dial now, and now the rolled hem option is at the top. And I always like to go for the shortest stitch length on a rolled hem because I think that fills the stitches in really nicely. But this is yet another way that the baby lock machines are just so easy to use. On a lot of other overlockers, you'll have to do quite a manual process to set up for a rolled hem. Sometimes you need to remove something from the machine called a stitch finger, but on the baby locks, there's no need to do any of that. You simply go round into the other side of your dial, select the relevant option on the stitch selector and adjust your stitch width, and you're ready to sew that lovely decorative finish. So we'll go ahead and sew that 3-thread rolled hem now. I'm just going to put the fabric under the foot, and I'm using a lighter weight fabric here, a cotton lawn, because that's the type of fabrics you would normally use this finish on. And you can see there what a lovely, neat finish that is to that fabric. So if you're working with a delicate fabric like this, I mean, people often use these edges for things like chiffon scarves and that sort of thing. But sometimes if I've made a dress or a blouse with a ruffle on it and I think a narrow hem would be too heavy, I don't want to press the fabric up and press it up again, this is a lovely alternative and just adds a unique sewing detail to your project as well. It's so lovely, and like I say, it is so much easier to set a baby lock machine up for this stitch thanks to that simple dial. And then once you chain those stitches off, you can also use those to create little belt loops and things like that for your projects as well, which is another really useful feature. But I just absolutely love that pretty decorative finish. Now I'm going to show you how easy it is to convert the machine from overlocker mode to cover stitch mode. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn this dial to drop the blade. So you'll see the blade has now dropped down level with the needle plate. We also need to bring our upper looper down. So to do that, I just turn this dial towards down, and then when I turn the hand wheel towards me, the upper looper will come down and it will stay down beneath the needle plate. So you can see now I'm turning that hand wheel and that upper looper isn't going to go anywhere. And then finally, we just want to move this dial down to threading mode, turn the hand wheel towards us, and that will engage the loopers. There we go. And our cover stitch looper is now engaged so that we can thread that and set the machine up for a cover stitch. The other thing we want to do as well is remove the overlocker cover, and we just slot that out like so. And we want to replace that with the cover stitch table, which comes included with the machine when you purchase it from us. And that just slots in the same way as the overlocker cover. And because we've dropped that upper looper down, that table can now sit flush with the needle plate. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, it's a big area here to the right of the needle, so you are able to use the cover stitch binding attachments with the rake guide because there's plenty of room to attach those there. And there is a tutorial video on my channel that you can watch for that technique. It's a really professional way that you can attach neck bands using the cover stitch option on this machine. To thread the cover stitch looper, we place the reel of thread on the thread stand at the front, take it up through the telescopic thread guide at the top again, and then we're going to pass the thread through this metal guide here, which on the Aspire, again, it's an update, it's improved, it's even easier than before. On some of the previous models, you had to put the thread in almost sideways. On this one, we go from the front of the machine to the back of the machine, so it's really accessible and easy. And then we take it around the guide there and up and over. And you can always give it a little floss just to make sure it's in the tension, because that's where the tension is. Bring it behind the thread guide on the front here, and then we just follow the same process as we did for the loopers. Pop the thread in the threading port, labelled C for cover stitch, and press the button. And that is our cover stitch looper threaded. And then we can open the left hand side of the machine and just make sure that the thread has made it into the tray which is in the machine there. It just opens out like so, and you'll be able to see that you've got the thread in the tray on that side. And before we can sew the cover stitch, we obviously need to bring our needles forward from the overlocker needle bar to the cover stitch needle bar. So I've already put 2 needles in the cover stitch needle bar, but I'm going to remove the overlocker needle we were using previously and just slot that in to the first cover stitch hole so that we can do the triple cover stitch as discussed. And when you insert your needles, you want to make sure they're right up at the top and you can see them through the window there, and then just tighten the grub screw with the Allen key provided with the machine when you purchase it from us. Just make sure it's got a bite and it's secure. Don't be tempted to over tighten them, and you are then ready to thread those cover stitch needles. To thread the needles for a cover stitch, we're going to place the thread on the thread stands, take it through the telescopic guide at the top again, and then there's a metal thread guide on the back of the machine here. We just click the thread into place there, and then we follow one of the 3 thread paths across the top of the machine. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and they correspond with your cover stitch needles. So you can choose to sew with any combination. You can sew with the 2 outer ones for a wide cover stitch. You could sew with 2 and 1 or 2 and 3 for a narrow twin cover stitch, or you can do the triple cover stitch, which is my favourite, where you use all 3. And I'm going to set the machine up for that because I think it is the prettiest stitch. Because you've got the 3 needles and the looper, it just creates a really lovely decorative effect. And I actually like to use that sometimes on the right side of my garments rather than the wrong side, because it is such a pretty design. Great for active wear and things like that. And that's the great thing about these baby lock machines and the Aspire, is that you've got lots and lots of different stitch combinations that you can play around with and make your projects really unique. But we've got all of the thread in those thread paths now, so we'll go down to the front of the machine and thread those needles. And then to thread the needles for the cover stitch, it's very similar to your sewing machine again. You want to just send the thread behind this guide here, and then we're going to go up and over the metal guide and around the guide on the front of the needle bar. So I'm just going to take the left hand thread, take that up and over, and then this thread guide here, you want to just go behind that, bring the thread across to the left hand side, and then I can thread that left needle. I'm just going to snip the end off my thread, it's rather long, and then just poke that through there. And then when you thread your needles for a cover stitch, you just want to bring the thread up and over the foot and to the left hand side of the machine. So just bring that up like so. and just leave it across the top of the foot like so, and then repeat for the other 2 needles. So next I would take my centre needle, and again you can do it in any order, but it just kind of makes logical sense to work your way from one end to the other with the triple cover stitch, so you know you've got your thread for each needle in the right thread path. But just pop that thread through there, and we've got our second needle done, and then we're going to repeat for the third one, again going around that guide on the needle bar. You can see all those threads are nice and organised in their right slots and in their right paths. And just pop that through the eye of the third needle. And we're ready. We're now ready to go ahead and sew a triple cover stitch. To sew the cover stitch, I've just gone back into the standard side of the stitch length dial, and I've set my stitch length at 4, but you have got a range that you can set it at. Again, all of that information is in the manual. And then I'm just going to slide the dial back up to serging from threading so I can close that front cover. And then we always want to start our cover stitch with some fabric under the needles. So I'm going to put my fabric under like so. Obviously, if you're doing a hem, you would fold your fabric under. But for the purposes of the video, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to put some fabric under the foot. And then you want to turn your hand wheel towards you 2 or 3 times just to get the stitch started. And then snip off your excess thread, and away we go. And you can see there we've got a beautiful triple cover stitch on some scuba fabric I've done it on, and look at those lovely stitches on the wrong side, and you can see what I mean there, that on activewear and things like that, or just t-shirts, sweatshirts, you can use that on the right side of the fabric to create really pretty designs. But I just absolutely love that triple cover stitch. Where your threads have got caught at the start there, you can just free those up like so, but it's so lovely and neat. And I'll go ahead and show you on a double layer as well. And one of the lovely things is the fact that you can chain off on these machines as well. You can't do that on all cover stitch machines, but on the baby locks you can. So I'm just going to pop my fabric under the foot on a double layer and go ahead and sew. And again, a beautiful triple cover stitch on one side, and then that lovely decorative stitch on the other side. It's just gorgeous. And seeing as we've got the machine set up for a triple cover stitch, I thought it would be a nice opportunity to show you one of the combined stitches using the extra thread stand on the back of the machine. So I left it threaded for a triple cover stitch, and then I've also threaded it for a narrow 3-thread overlocking stitch, which I showed you earlier in the video as well. I've got the overlocker cover back on. I have set my stitch length and width according to the 3-thread overlocking recommendations, and I've re-engaged my blade because I want to trim the edge of that fabric. But let's go ahead and sew this combination stitch now so you can see one of those in action. You can see there I've got that lovely triple cover stitch along here, and then that 3-thread overlocking stitch on the edge of the fabric. It just gives you opportunities to play around and combine different stitches, and there are so many different combinations you can do. There's also a compendium that you can buy. It's available to buy on our website along with all the baby lock accessories as well, and that gives you lots more in-depth information around different stitch combinations as well. But you can just see there that, you know, if you want to really play around and do some decorative finishes on fabrics, you can create that by combining different stitches. Having one of the combined machines that will allow you to overlock and cover stitch not only allows you to create those expressive decorative stitches, but it also allows you to create that 5-thread safety stitch that I mentioned earlier in the video, which is commonly used in industry. And to do that, you just sew a 2-thread chain stitch in combination with a 3-thread overlocking stitch, and that will create a seam and finish the edge of the fabric in one. So it is commonly used in industry for garment construction. Obviously you can use your 4-thread overlocking stitch to sew a seam and finish the edges as well, but this is just another nice alternative. It can be done on woven or knit fabrics, but it's a lovely neat finish. And one of the things I especially love about it is if you choose to use your left cover stitch needle, it will give you a perfect 5/8 seam. So you can see there, I've got a perfect 5/8 seam, and it's just really, really useful for that garment construction. And one of the great advantages of going for one of the models like the Aspire that will allow you to sew a cover stitch and an overlocking stitch. So if you're impressed with all the magnificent features on this machine and you'd like to purchase it, click the link in the corner of the screen to take a closer look on our website and you can purchase it there. In the box you'll find everything you would expect: the detailed instruction manual, the quick reference threading guide, the foot control, some spare needles, a spare blade, screwdrivers, various different spool caps for different types of thread, thread nets, your cover stitch table and the screws to attach different accessories that you might want to purchase for it too, plus the perfectly fitting trim bin and the knee lift. Then if you'd like to take your sewing skills even further, another great feature of the Babylock machines is that there are a huge range of feet and accessories available to buy separately for specific sewing tasks to make them even easier and give you even more professional results. So you can buy things like a beading foot, a gathering foot, a piping foot, various different binding attachments that will give you ultra professional results on things like neck bindings on t-shirts and dresses, for example. They're all available to buy on our site. Just click the link in the corner of the screen, look for the Babylock feet and accessories, and you'll find them available to purchase there. And if you have any trouble choosing, don't hesitate to get in contact with us, because that is what we're here for. I've given you a really good overview of the Babylock Aspire, but if I've left any of your questions unanswered, don't hesitate to get in contact. That's what we're here for. All of our machines come with a full manufacturer's warranty, so that's 2 years as standard, but it can be extended to 4 years in total, free of charge, by filling in a simple form. We offer the best prices on our machines, but if you do see this model cheaper anywhere else, don't hesitate to contact us. We'll always be happy to help. Your machine will be delivered the next working day, free of charge, by courier, with a dedicated time slot so you know exactly when that happy post is going to arrive. I hope you're feeling excited about your new machine, and thanks for watching.